Welcome to Momentum Mind, the place where powerful stories meet personal growth. Here, we turn life-changing books into immersive journeys that awaken your imagination and fuel your mindset for the road ahead. If you're ready to build momentum in your life and unlock the strength within your mind, then you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Chapter 1. The Masked Carnival. The city of Ethros woke each dawn in a dazzling swirl of colors. Its streets were alive with jugglers tossing flame, merchants dangling fabrics like liquid light, and noble towers gleaming with carved stone faces that never blinked. Yet, beneath this dazzle, a quiet truth pulsed. Everyone wore a mask. The masks were not mere ornaments. They shimmered with enchantment, hiding the true nature of the wearer. A man trembling with worry might appear bold as a hawk. A woman burning with envy might shine with gentle warmth. The masks made Ethros beautiful, but they also made it treacherous. Into this swirl wandered Elias, a young traveler with sand-colored hair and a restless heart. He had come seeking knowledge, hoping to understand why people's words often felt different than their eyes, why their voices said one thing while their silences cried another. That morning he stumbled upon the great Carnival of Veils, held in the center square. It was more than a festival. It was a living river of performances. Acrobats leapt through hoops of fire, dancers spun until their feet blurred, and magicians pulled doves from shadows. Yet what fascinated Elias most was not the spectacle but the audience. Their masks shifted constantly, smiling even when a willful boredom dragged their shoulders low, glowing with admiration while their eyes darted with jealousy. At the edge of the square an old woman sat, her back bent, her face hidden beneath a stitched mask of cracked porcelain. She beckoned Elias closer, her voice rasping like dry leaves. "You wish to see?" she said, her tone both question and command. "But you look only at the masks. That is why you wander lost." Elias frowned. "How else can one see, if every face is hidden?" The woman's bony fingers tapped a rhythm on her cane. "The masks cannot hide the movement beneath. Watch the hands that twitch when anger stirs. Watch the eyes. They betray hunger long before mouths do. Words tell stories, but the body tells truth." Elias gazed again at the crowd with new attention. At once the world shifted. He noticed the nobleman whose teeth flashed too wide, yet whose fingers clenched into fists within silk gloves. He saw the maiden whose mask of kindness tilted every time her rival drew near, leaving a shadow of disdain in her posture. The city was alive with whispers, not from lips but from shoulders, blinks, and sighs. "Why do they hide?" Elias asked. "Why fear being known?" The old woman's mask glimmered faintly in the fading light. "Because the heart is soft," she said. "And softness invites wounds, so they wear masks to survive, but also to deceive. If you cannot see beyond them, you will forever dance to their tune." Elias was silent, the noise of the carnival fading into a distant roar in his ears. He realized that he too wore a mask, one of calm when he felt anxious, of bravery when he shook inside. And then came the fanfare. A blast of horns shook the square as the High Lord of Ethros strode onto the stage, his golden mask polished to a blinding sheen. The people cheered, their masks beaming with false devotion. Yet Elias noticed the truth. Their cheers carried no heat. Their hands clapped on rhythm, but their bodies drooped with weariness. Even the Lord's mask trembled at the edges, flickering with exhaustion as if the burden of his own disguise aided him. The old woman leaned close. "Soon you will see the Lord's mask crack. And when that happens, the city will tremble. You must be ready, wanderer. For once you learn to see behind the veil, you cannot unsee." The horns blared louder, drowning her words. The crowd surged, voices mixing in forced adoration. Elias struggled to keep sight of the High Lord, and it was then, just for a heartbeat, that he saw it. The golden mask slipped, revealing a flicker of something beneath. Not majesty, not serenity, but eyes haunted, desperate and afraid. Elias gasped, but the moment vanished. The mask sealed again, and the Lord waved with hollow grace. The old woman had gone. Only her cane remained, leaning against the stone wall, its wood carved with tiny, unblinking eyes. Elias touched it, and in that instant, the carnival around him seemed to change. The voices grew harsher, the laughter shriller, the shimmer of the masks more fragile. It was as though he had stepped behind a painted curtain to glimpse the machinery of the play, and as the night fire crackled, an unease stirred in his chest. If the city lived by masks, what would happen when one shattered completely? The horns faded, the sky bled into twilight, and Elias tightened his grip on the cane. He felt a path opening before him, leading deeper into shadows where masks grew thinner and hearts beat louder. He did not yet know whether he was walking toward danger or discovery. But when the High Lord's eyes had flickered through that golden mask, Elias had seen fear, and fear always meant something was about to break. Chapter 2. The Whispering Market. The morning after the Carnival of Veils, Athros felt different to Elias. The vibrant colors of the city now seemed like a thin veneer, and the cheerful chatter of the crowds sounded like a carefully orchestrated symphony designed to drown out a deeper, more discordant hum. He clutched the old woman's cane, its carved eyes seeming to watch the world with him, guiding his gaze beyond the surface. He found himself drawn to the Whispering Market, a labyrinth of stalls tucked away in the city's oldest quarter. Here the masks were less ornate, often simple cloth or painted wood, suggesting a different kind of transaction. The air was thick with the scent of exotic spices, strange herbs, and the metallic tang of freshly forged trinkets. As he wandered, Elias observed a merchant, his mask a picture of serene contentment, haggling over a shimmering bolt of silk. His voice was calm, his gestures open, yet Elias noticed the subtle tightening of his jaw, the way his eyes, visible through the mask's slits, darted to a rival's stall across the way. The rival's mask, a jovial, laughing face, seemed to mock him, even as the man behind it meticulously polished his own wares. Elias remembered the old woman's words. Watch the hands that twitch when anger stirs. Watch the eyes. They betray hunger long before mouths do. He saw it now. The serene merchant's calm words were a performance, a shield against the burning envy he felt for his competitor's success. His true desire was not just to sell his silk, but to outshine the other, to diminish his rival's gleam. Further into the market, a young artisan, her mask a delicate bloom of innocence, displayed her intricate silver jewelry. A wealthy patron, adorned in a mask of benevolent wisdom, admired a necklace. Her words were full of praise, her tone encouraging, yet her fingers lingered on the piece with a possessive grip, and her gaze, though seemingly kind, held a glint of something sharp, almost predatory. Elias sensed a hunger not for beauty but for ownership, for the power to claim and control. The artisan, despite her innocent mask, subtly angled her body, protecting her creations, a silent defiance against the patron's subtle aggression. He saw it everywhere. The forced smiles of those who secretly resented another's fortune, the exaggerated politeness that barely concealed a simmering contempt, the sudden bursts of generosity that were merely bids for attention or influence. The masks were not just hiding faces, they were hiding the raw, untamed forces of human emotion, envy, aggression, desire, insecurity that truly dictated every interaction. Elias stopped at a stall selling ancient maps and scrolls. The proprietor, a man with a scholarly mask of deep contemplation, was engrossed in a faded parchment. Elias felt a strange pull towards a particular scroll, its edges singed, its writing in a language he didn't recognize. As he reached for it, the proprietor's hand shot out, surprisingly swift, covering the scroll. "This one is not for sale," the man said, his voice calm but his masked face rigid. Elias looked at him, truly looked. The scholarly mask was still in place, but beneath it, the man's shoulders were hunched, his breath shallow. His eyes, usually placid, now held a flicker of intense, almost desperate attachment. It wasn't about the scroll's value. It was about something deeper, something personal and fiercely guarded. "I understand," Elias said, withdrawing his hand. He realized the man's attachment was not rational but emotional. The scroll held a secret, a memory, a piece of his past that he clung to with an almost childlike possessiveness. To try and take it would be to provoke a primal, unmasked reaction. As he turned to leave, the proprietor's voice, softer now, called him back. "You see more than most, young wanderer. Be careful what you seek. Some truths are best left undisturbed." Elias nodded, a chill running down his spine. He was beginning to understand that the masks were not just for deception. They were also for protection. People wore them to guard their vulnerabilities, their raw desires, their hidden fears, and to strip away a mask, even accidentally, could expose a dangerous truth. He continued through the market, the cane tapping a quiet rhythm against the cobblestones. The air grew heavier, the whispers of the market seeming to carry not just the sounds of commerce, but the unspoken desires and resentments of the crowd. He saw a group of merchants, their masks of camaraderie bright, yet their eyes constantly assessing each other, calculating, competing. Their laughter was loud, but their gazes were cold. Suddenly, a commotion erupted near the market's edge. A young woman, her mask a simple, unadorned piece of wood, had stumbled, scattering a basket of vibrant ripe fruit across the dusty ground. Immediately, several masked figures rushed to help her, their faces radiating concern and helpfulness. Yet, Elias noticed the subtle jostling, the way some hands reached for the largest, most perfect fruits, ostensibly to help, but truly to claim. He saw the quick, furtive glances, the almost imperceptible shifts in body language that betrayed a self-interest lurking beneath the veneer of altruism. The young woman, her own mask now slightly askew, revealed a flash of genuine distress, a raw vulnerability that cut through the market's artifice. For a moment, the masks of those around her seemed to waver, their true intentions almost visible. It was a fleeting glimpse, but enough for Elias to understand. The emotions were always there, a powerful undercurrent shaping every action, every word, every masked interaction. He felt a growing sense of unease. If these hidden forces were so potent, how could anyone truly navigate this world? How could one build trust or even understanding when everyone was constantly battling their own unseen desires and fears? As the sun began to dip, casting long, distorted shadows across the market, Elias saw a figure emerge from a narrow alleyway. It was a man whose mask was unlike any he had seen, a patchwork of different expressions, constantly shifting, never settling. One moment it was a smile, the next a frown, then a look of intense concentration, then a blank stare. It was as if he couldn't decide which mask to wear, or perhaps he wore them all at once. The man moved with a strange, unsettling grace, his eyes visible through the shifting mask, holding a deep, unsettling intelligence. He seemed to observe everything, yet reveal nothing. Elias felt a prickle of apprehension. This man was different. He wasn't just wearing a mask, he was the masks. And as he passed, Elias felt a cold certainty. This man understood the hidden currents of the city far better than anyone, and he used that knowledge for his own, unknown purposes. The market grew quiet as the man disappeared into the twilight. Elias stood alone, the cane heavy in his hand. He had seen the hidden desires, the secret aggressions, the subtle manipulations. He had glimpsed the true engines of human action. But he also sensed a deeper game at play, a more profound mastery of these hidden forces. And he knew with a chilling certainty that he had only just begun to scratch the surface of Ethros's true nature. The shifting mask of the stranger was a promise of deeper mysteries and perhaps greater dangers yet to come. Chapter 3. The Hall of Echoes night draped Ethros in violet shadows, and the city lit itself with lanterns strung along high balconies and low doorways. The air was rich with incense and roasted meats, yet Elias wandered without hunger, his mind gnawed by the image of that man in the shifting mask. Masks that smiled, frowned, wept, and laughed in a heartbeat. It was too deliberate to be madness, too fluid to be chance. It was mastery. The cane with its carved eyes tapped against smooth flagstones, its rhythm almost guiding him deeper into the unfamiliar part of the city. The streets narrowed. Vendors' voices softened. The crowds thinned until only a hush accompanied his steps. Finally, Elias came upon a tall, arched structure of black stone, its entrance guarded by figures in plain, featureless masks. Above the arch, carved in fading letters, were words he could not at first understand. Then, somehow, the meaning seeped into him. The Hall of Echoes. Drawn as if by an invisible thread, Elias presented himself at the doorway. The guard said nothing, only stepped aside. Inside, the hall stretched wide and cavernous, filled with a low golden glow emanating from braziers that flickered without smoke. At the center stood countless people, arranged in small clusters, speaking softly. Yet their voices did not vanish into air. Each word spoken lingered, repeated, reshaped, until it became a faint murmur circling the chamber. It was as though every conversation refused to die, drifting endlessly like mist. Elias moved through them cautiously. At one circle he saw two old friends speaking. Their masks wore brotherly smiles, but the echoes whispered differently. "I envy your house," one voice repeated. "I will take her from you," breathed the other. Startled, Elias gasped. These whispers were not spoken aloud, but rather the true intentions hidden behind their words. The hall revealed not only speech, but the echo of thought beneath speech. He tried again. A young musician pleaded with a noble patron, mask beaming with gratitude. "Your generosity inspires me," she said aloud. But the echo hissed, "If you refuse, I will curse your name." The hall was alive with duplicity and contradiction. It was overwhelming, hearing every soul's concealed motives coil outward. To Elias, it felt like watching the skeleton beneath the skin of conversation. And then he saw him. The man in the ever-changing mask stood at the far side of the hall, cloaked in deep crimson. Unlike others, his echoes did not linger in broken fragments. They came like a chorus, layered, deliberate, 100 voices that circled him just as smoothly as his mask shifted. Some were kind, others cruel, some desperate, some sly. A cacophony of possible selves, all alive in him at once. Elias's skin prickled. Was this man truth, or pure deception? If others carried singular hidden intentions bound to their masks, then who was someone who embodied them all, weaving lies into truth and truth into lies? The man's head turned slowly until those eyes, sharp as obsidian shards, found Elias. Time seemed to freeze. The echoes around them softened, as though bowing to silence. The mask shifted again into a knowing smirk. Elias gripped the cane, whispering in his own mind, "Don't show the fear. Don't let him see it." Yet in the hall, even thoughts were not private. His whisper echoed faintly, bouncing back to him with merciless clarity. The man's mask melted into a grin as though amused. Summoning courage, Elias stepped forward. "Who are you?" His voice trembled, both with awe and unease. The man tilted his head. His mask slid into one of absolute serenity. When he spoke, his voice seemed to vibrate with many undertones as though each possible self spoke alongside him. "I am no one," he said. Then, after a pause so sharp Elias felt his breath cut short, the man continued, "And everyone." The echoes devoured his words, repeating them endlessly, layering them until the hall thundered with no one and everyone. Elias shook his head. "Why do you wear so many faces? What are you hiding?" The man walked closer, his steps soundless. "Do you believe masks hide truth? You are still blind, wanderer. Masks are not cages for truth. Masks are keys. With the right mask, I unlock what others most fear or most desire. I bend them to me. You call it deception. I call it freedom." "Freedom?" Elias demanded. "You sound enslaved to lies." The mask hardened into scorn, then softened into pity. "You see only the surface. You imagine that beneath every mask is some solid face, a true self waiting. But that is the greatest illusion of all. Beneath the mask is only clay. I mold it. Others deny their envy, deny their greed, deny their longing. I embody all, and so none can bind me to one." The brazier light flickered as if reacting to his words. Elias staggered back, the sheer force of the man's confidence, his command of the hall's echoes, pressed like invisible weight. The stranger leaned near. Learn this. To hear the echo is to know the crack in another's mask. Find the echo, and you find their leash. Pull the leash, and you own them. With that, he turned and strode toward the shadows. Elias felt a storm in his chest. The hall roared with echoes, each whisper now laced with schemes, betrayals, and hungers. He wanted to cover his ears, yet the cane's carved eyes pulsed faintly with fire, pushing him to listen, to understand, to learn without breaking. At the doorway, crimson cloak glowing like bloody flame, the man looked back once more. His mask was blank now, unreadable. "You follow," he said softly. Or maybe it was the echo that spoke. Elias could not tell. The hall dimmed, shadows stretched, and with a final tap of the cane, Elias realized something terrifying. He was already stepping forward. Chapter 4. The Spider's Garden. The crimson cloak moved like a ribbon of flame through the narrow streets, Elias trailing behind at a cautious distance. The man with the shifting masks walked without hesitation, as though the city itself bent to make way for him. Past the glimmering canals, through a corridor of marble arches, until they reached a place Elias had never seen, a courtyard hidden within tall walls covered in flowering ivy. Lanterns the color of honey hung from every branch, casting the garden in an otherworldly glow. At the center, the stranger paused, waiting. His mask rippled once, serenity to laughter, laughter to cruelty, before settling into a welcoming smile. For the first time, he gestured Elias forward. "Come, learn." Elias hesitated but stepped into the courtyard. The air smelled of roses and something sharper, like smoke hidden under perfume. Benches circled the space, and upon them lounged men and women adorned in silks, jewels, and masks more elaborate than any Elias had yet seen. They glittered like stars, laughing and murmuring, yet there was something unsettling in their leisure. They reminded him not of guests in a garden, but of prey caught in a web, waiting for the spider. The stranger moved among them gracefully, his mask flickering through subtle expressions, amusement, adoration, sorrow, longing. With each shift, people turned toward him as though he had plucked an invisible string in their hearts. He did not ask for their trust, yet they leaned closer. He did not beg their eyes, yet they followed his every step. Elias could not look away either. He stopped beside a woman cloaked in sapphire silk, her mask painted with soft curves of maternal kindness. She sighed, speaking of her loneliness, how her children grew distant. The man's mask changed, gentle sorrow now, a mirror of her pain. "They are blind," he murmured. "To leave such a heart uncherished is their folly." The woman's breath caught, her mask quivering. She reached for his hand before she realized it. A thread of desire, invisible yet undeniable, stretched between them. He moved on. Another, this one a lord with a mask of stern command. He boasted of his wealth, his victories. The man's mask turned reverent, almost submissive. "No one rivals your strength," he said softly. "I would follow you into fire." The lord's back straightened, his laughter deepening. Yet Elias saw it. Pride swelling like a sail, tugged perfectly by a hidden wind. On and on the stranger went, weaving himself into every soul without force, without threat. Sometimes he soothed with sympathy, other times flattered with awe, other times teased with playfulness at just the right moment. His gift was not in what he said, but in knowing what they longed to hear, the ache behind their masks, the hunger they dared not speak. He became the balm, the mirror, the promise. Elias whispered to himself, "He's seducing them." The cane's carved eyes seemed to nod in agreement. At last, the stranger stopped beneath a twisted willow, its branches sweeping low like curtains of night. He beckoned Elias closer. "Do you see now?" Every mask he had worn throughout the evening flickered across his face in an instant, then dissolved into one of calm satisfaction. Elias swallowed. "You bend hearts as if they were reeds in a river," Not bend, the man corrected. Reveal. Everyone walks with hidden thirst. They crave to be admired, to be consoled, to be affirmed. Show them what they already seek, and they will call it love, loyalty, devotion. They will follow you willingly, even against their own senses. The guests around them burst into laughter at something trivial, their joy oddly hollow, as if drawn more from his presence than the jest itself. Elias felt a shiver. For all their masks, they were tangled in his threads now. But is it right? Elias forced the question, his voice breaking. To shape people like clay, to drink from their weaknesses? The mask stilled into something unreadable. For the first time, silence hung between them. Finally, the stranger said, "Right or wrong? These are masks as well. Tell me, wanderer, would you rather live truth yet powerless, unseen, unheard, or live through masks and command empires?" No answer came. Elias's thoughts churned like a storm. He hated the certainty in the man's voice, yet part of him recognized the truth. He had seen the faces in the whispering market, their envy and hunger, their self-deceptions. If one man could learn to navigate those currents while others drowned, was that not a kind of power beyond steel or gold? The man leaned close, voice dropping to a whisper. Tonight you watched threads being woven, but soon you will be caught in one yourself. When it comes, will you know? Or will you smile at your mask, blind to the hand that moves you? With a ripple of crimson cloak, he vanished into the willow's shadow, leaving Elias rooted among the glittering guests. The garden, so enchanting moments before, now felt dangerous, alive with unseen strings. The laughter sharpened, the perfumes cloyed, the lantern light too golden, like the lure of a trap. Elias clutched the cane tighter. For the first time, he wondered not just how to resist the stranger, but whether part of him already longed to follow. The willow swayed. A cold wind stirred through the garden, and somewhere in the shadows Elias swore he heard echoes laughing. Chapter 5. The Mirror's Trap. Dawn poured through Ethros in pale streaks of rose and silver, but to Elias it felt dim, as though the city had learned to whisper inside his head. That night in the garden haunted him. The stranger's words, the way people bent without knowing, like moths drawn to flame. The cane in his hand felt heavier than before. Each time he looked at its carved eyes, he half expected them to blink. They seemed to urge him forward, reminding him that he was not simply an observer anymore. He had entered the web. By midday, wandering along the canals, Elias was pulled by music and laughter spilling from an elegant hall draped in velvet. Inside, a great gathering took place, merchants, nobles, artists, all masked in splendor. It was a banquet of painted faces, each one shining brighter than the last. Curiosity, or perhaps the cane's silent prodding, led Elias through the tall carved doorway. The hall glittered with chandeliers that dripped crystal like frozen rain. Perfume, wine, and roasted meats thickened the air. Everyone was watching everyone else, their masks fixed in delight, their movements choreographed to conceal envy, rivalry, longing. Almost immediately, Elias felt the pull. A woman in crimson lace approached. Her mask bore the delicate sorrow of tragedy, yet her eyes glimmered with fire. "You are new, aren't you?" she murmured, her voice like silk sliding over stone. Elias opened his mouth, but she continued, stepping closer. "I could see you across the room. You don't belong to their schemes. You are different." Her words sank into him like warm honey. No one had said such things before. He swallowed, suddenly aware of his breath, of how the hall blurred around them. Different, chosen. Her hand brushed against his arm, gentle, deliberate. The cane burned faintly, warning. Elias forced himself to look, truly look. Her mask drooped slightly at the edge, revealing a curl of lips that was more calculation than affection. Her compliments felt like hooks in the water, dangled for him to bite. "Why me?" he asked sharply, though his voice faltered. Her mask softened into wounded innocence. "Because I can see what others cannot. a spark, a promise. The words pressed against him, tempting. He had dreamed of being seen like this, of someone recognizing a hidden greatness. Was she lying? Or had she glimpsed something true? He staggered backwards, but another figure pressed forward, a stately man whose mask shone with stern approval. "The lady is right," the man said, nodding. "You do not realize what you are, traveler. You belong among us." Now 2 voices, each binding him in expectation. His chest tightened. Was this what the stranger meant? That the leash comes not through force, but through longing? That one's own desires weave the trap? The chandeliers above seemed to sway. Their voices wove around him, promising admiration, belonging, power. The more he tried to resist, the more alluring their tone became. He realized, horrified, that the banquet itself was a snare. One moment of surrender, and he would be woven into their world of masks forever. Suddenly laughter erupted at the hall's far end. The stranger had arrived. His shifting mask shimmered as he entered, absorbing every gaze without effort. The crowd parted like water. He approached Elias slowly, crimson cloak flowing, masks flickering through sympathy, mischief, disdain. Finally he chose one, a mask of quiet amusement. "So quickly," the stranger mused, his voice carrying even through the noise. "I told you, didn't I? It is not the web that catches you. It is your own hunger for the web's promise." Elias glanced at the woman beside him, still gazing with fiery sorrow, and at the man with stern approval. They seemed so sure, so convincing. Yet now, in the stranger's presence, he saw them differently. Each word, each gesture, was not about him, but about the reflection they wanted him to see. They were mirrors angled toward their own desires, using his longing to polish their shine. He had nearly fallen. The stranger leaned close, his whisper sharp enough to cut. Lesson 1. The mask you most want is always the one that will ensnare you. Crave praise and flattery binds you. Crave power and loyalty blinds you. Crave love and sweetness poisons you. The hall laughed and twinkled as if oblivious. Yet Elias felt cold sweat line his palms. He raised the cane as though for balance. Its many eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the truth beneath every mask in the room. Greed behind laughter, desperation behind charm, hunger behind grace. The stranger's mask shifted into approval now, as though Elias had passed the first test by not falling entirely. "Good," he whispered. "You begin to see. But sight will not save you. You must learn how to use it." The hall dimmed, the chandeliers flickering. Whispers erupted as if the echoes from the great hall had followed here, curling like smoke. Elias clutched the cane tighter, trying to steady his breath. He knew now that resisting masks was not enough. One day soon, he would have to wear one of his own. Then the stranger turned, voice dark as the closing of a door. "Tomorrow, you will learn how puppets are made." The banquet roared back into laughter, but Elias's blood chilled, for he realized one thing. The stranger wasn't promising to teach. He was promising to use. Chapter 6. The Puppeteer's Stage. The sun vanished early that evening, as though it too did not wish to linger on what Ethros was becoming. Elias followed the crimson cloak through narrow veins of alleyways until they opened into a vast public square, ringed by towers and carved facades. Torches flared atop tall poles, their fires swaying in the restless breeze. Crowds had gathered, a sea of masks shimmering in orange light. Some masks laughed, others scowled, some shone with feigned serenity, yet all turned their gaze toward a raised stone platform at the square's heart. Elias stood at the edge, concealed within shadows, clutching the cane of many eyes. His chest tightened as the stranger in crimson ascended the stage. Tonight the mask he wore was simple, ordinary, unremarkable. The face of a man both approachable and flawed. It was unsettling for Elias, for it seemed less like artifice and more like an invitation. The stranger lifted his hands. No words at first, only silence. The crowd stirred. Silence itself became a leash of attention, each breath tethering them closer. Then he spoke. His voice was not loud, but the square bent to it as though the stone itself wished to listen. He began with confession. Tales of hardships, stumbles, fears. His mask shifted with every sentence, displaying sorrow when speaking of loss, humility when admitting mistakes, warmth when describing hope. Elias waited for jeers, for laughter, but instead the crowd leaned forward. By showing weakness, the stranger had made them safe to lower their masks in kind. One man began to nod, then another, until hundreds echoed the same rhythm. Then came the turn. His words darkened, pointing to enemies, unseen, yet blamed for the people's suffering. His voice grew sharp, his mask hardening, sparking resentment in the listeners. Soon their hands clenched, their feet stomped, their masks cracked with fire in their eyes. Finally, he lifted them again with promises too sweet, visions too bright. He told them they could be more than victims, they could be chosen. That together they already possessed the power to rise. Their roars shook the courtyards, echoing against towers. Elias trembled. Each step was invisible, yet perfect. Draw them with humility, inflame them with anger, bind them with belonging, and release them with hope. Their hearts no longer beat separately, but as one, pulsing with the rhythm he orchestrated. The stranger dropped his voice into a whisper, yet the crowd hushed enough to catch it. "Stand with me," he said. "Become more than shadows and masks. Become a flame that will burn away the lies." The square erupted, thousands of fists raised, thousands of voices melding into a single roar. Elias could not move. The cane in his hand vibrated violently, the carved eyes glaring with panic as though to say, "This is the danger." Not one mask, many. When they fuse, they become unstoppable. He staggered back. The sound was overwhelming, no longer human. It was storm, thunder, tide. The stranger did not just control individuals, he could take their hidden longings and weave them into a collective body, loyal and savage. The crowd began to chant, repeat, echo. The square itself shook like a drum under their stamping feet. From his stage, the stranger's shifting mask paused and turned. Even through flame and distance, his black glass eyes fell upon Elias. The mask changed into something Elias hated most, his own face reflected back at him. The throng cheered louder, but Elias realized the mask was not for them. It was for him alone. "You too could command them," the mask seemed to say. "All it takes is one choice, one leash pulled, one mask worn well." Elias stumbled into the shadows, blood pounding in his ears. Could crowds truly surrender so easily? Could a man's voice drag fear into rage and rage into devotion? He thought of the High Lord with the golden mask, the merchants, the banquet, each one circling their own small games. Here was something larger, dangerous. The chanting grew. The square boiled, and Elias understood something with chilling certainty. The city would not belong to the one with the sharpest sword or the most gold. It would belong to whoever best commanded the invisible strings of hearts, weaving them into a single puppet that danced willingly. The stranger raised both arms high. The roar intensified, unstoppable. Firelight made his mask blaze as he shouted, "The hour begins!" The square shook, and in that deafening roar, Elias could not tell if he had heard the first cry of triumph or the first crack of doom. Chapter 7. The Broken Choir. Elias fled the square with the chants still pounding inside his skull, each echo like a hammer on his ribs. The cane's eyes glowed faintly, showing him alleys to slip through, doors to pass unseen, shadows to cling to while the crowd surged behind him, lost in devotion. Only when the torches of the square dimmed to sparks in the distance did he dare to breathe freely. But freedom felt hollow. The chants continued in his head long after the voices had faded. Their unity was terrifying, intoxicating. He had felt for a brief moment even tempted to join them. That fear gnawed him deeper than the crowd's fury ever could. The cane tugged him along old stone steps spiraling into a darker quarter of Ethros. Here, the city's brilliance thinned to ruins eaten by weeds, cracked fountains, windows shuttered even against the moonlight. It smelled of mildew and ashes, and the silence was so deep it felt alive. In a crumbling hall with shattered glass overhead, Elias found them, faces pale beneath cheap, fading masks. Some sat with blank gazes, some muttered to themselves, some rocked gently as if trying to soothe invisible wounds. Their movements were jagged, broken, as though strings had once pulled them too tight and then abruptly snapped. An old man noticed Elias and shuffled forward. His mask had no paint left, just bare wood, worn smooth by endless tears. His voice cracked. "You felt it, didn't you? His voice. It burns through you. You think you hate it, but your heart leans forward before you can stop it." Elias swallowed. "You followed him?" The old man's shoulders sagged. "We all did. At first it felt like light after endless night. We belonged. We mattered. Then one day, he asked us to give more. A coin, a task, a secret. We obeyed. Then came anger, vengeance, cruelty. We obeyed still, until we no longer recognized our faces behind the masks we wore for him." A woman staggered near, her mask cracked in half, revealing deep lines etched in her cheeks. She clutched Elias's sleeve. "He teaches you to think it's for you, that you're powerful, but it is never you. It is his strings, his hand inside your chest." Her words clung to Elias like chains. His memory seized at the hall of echoes, the banquet of masks, the thunder of the crowd. Yes. Each time he had felt the current tugging him, sweet and subtle, until he barely knew where his thoughts ended and another's began. The old man touched the cane with trembling fingers. "That staff. It is a relic of watchers. They guard it against faces like his. It sees what eyes cannot. But take care, young one. Truth cuts both ways. If you peer too long into others, you may lose where you end and where they begin." Shadows shifted deeper in the ruined hall. More figures emerged, murmuring softly, a strange cadence rising like a hymn. Their voices rose and overlapped, some praising freedom, some sobbing regret, some cursing names Elias didn't know. It became a ragged choir of shattered believers, every verse discordant with guilt, grief, or desperate confession. Elias covered his ears, but the sound pressed through, rolling over him. He felt trapped between two dangerous fires, the roaring unity of the puppeteers' crowd and the broken echo of those abandoned when their use was done. He ran back into the night air, gasping, only for the choir to follow him in memory, clinging like smoke. The truth was unbearable. If the stranger could bind thousands with a whisper, what hope had Elias? Alone, he would always be outnumbered, his sight drowned by their chant. The moon glared white and cold above the city rooftops. Elias held the cane to his chest, whispering to it as if it were alive. "There must be another way. There must be a way to break his strings." The eyes carved along the wood gleamed faintly, and for the briefest heartbeat Elias thought he saw them turn, not outward but inward, as though the next mask he must learn to see through was his own. Then, from a distant tower, a horn cried out. Low, mournful, and heavy as iron chains. The sound rolled across Ethros, rattling windows, silencing alleys. Elias froze. The choir's warning returned in his mind, each word heavier than the last. You think you hate it, but your heart leans forward before you can stop it. The horn cried again, and Elias realized with horror that while the crowd slept, the puppeteer was already summoning them once more. Chapter 8. The Hunger Within. The horn's call still trembled in the night air as Elias fled through crooked streets. His feet hit stone, but his chest felt hollow, as if the sound itself had entered and taken root. He could almost hear the stranger's voice already rising like smoke from that mournful note, calling, binding, shaping. He ducked into an abandoned garden overrun with weeds, collapsed against a marble statue half buried in ivy, and clutched the cane. The carved eyes glowed faintly, but this time they were not looking outward at the city. They gazed up at him, unblinking, merciless. "You want it too," Elias whispered. His own voice startled him, for it seemed to come from someone else, an echo not unlike those in the hall. "You want their eyes. You want their cheers. You want to be seen." He tried to deny it, shaking his head violently, but the thought swelled anyway. How many nights had he dreamt of rising above his smallness? How many times had he longed for others to recognize something in him that he barely recognized himself? The stranger's words thundered back. "The mask you most want is the one that will ensnare you." Elias's hands shook around the cane. If this was true for others, it was true for him. His craving for validation, for belonging, was no different than the noble's hunger for flattery, the woman's desperate yearning for love, the crowd's lust for unity. The leash wound inward before it could ever be pulled outward. The weeds in the garden rustled. A figure emerged from shadow. The cracked, masked woman he had met in the ruined hall of the broken choir. Her voice was raw, scraped by sorrow. "You feel it now, don't you? The sweet poison, how it twists into your ribs." Elias swallowed, forcing calm. "Then how do I tear it out?" She sank beside him, her mask crumbling further, revealing one eye wet with despair. "You don't. You cannot pluck hunger from the heart. You can only look it in the face. If you name it, it weakens. If you deny it, it grows strong in shadow." Her words tasted of bitter truth. Elias had spent the whole journey watching others, yet never watching himself. The cane's eyes had gazed outward, never inward. Until now. He closed his eyes and let the hunger swell. Images rushed into him, standing upon the stone stage in the square, but with his voice commanding, not the stranger's. The crowd roaring his name. The woman of crimson lace leaning close to whisper adoration. Men bowing in loyalty, his chest filled with heat, then as quickly it shattered into shame. His pulse quickened. If I desire this, doesn't it mean I am no different than him? The cracked masked woman's gaze pierced him. Different, boy, if you know it. Different if you hold the leash in your hand rather than your throat. Silence hung. The moon carved everything with cold silver. Elias's breath came heavy, but the admission had lifted something. To name hunger was to bleed it of its poison, if only slightly. But then a deeper dread took shape. If his hidden longing could be used against him, what else lay buried, unspoken? Resentments, fears, unhealed wounds, all strings waiting to be tugged. The stranger did not create these desires. He uncovered them, sharpened them, shaped them into chains. And if Elias could not map his own hidden threads, the puppeteer would always be one step ahead. The cracked masked woman stood slowly. He will come for you again, not as enemy, not as master, but as mirror. When he does, you must already know the face he will try to show you. Otherwise, she touched her mask, splintered and hollow. You will end like us, empty. Her shape melted back into the overgrowth, leaving Elias alone with the moon and the statue's blind stare. He leaned his forehead against the cane. The cravings did not vanish, but now they had names carved into them. Recognition, belonging, power. Naming them made them smaller, though they still coiled inside like living snakes. In the silence, another sound pealed softly through the city. Not horns this time, but a low current of distant chanting, faint yet growing. The stranger was stirring the masses again, weaving their threads into a rope thick enough to strangle reason. Elias stood, breathing hard. If he could not master the hunger within, he would have no chance against the puppeteer without. He raised the cane, its eyes now burning like coals, and whispered not to the city, but to himself. Show me every face I wear, whether I want to see it or not. The cane pulsed. The garden warped faintly, shadows tugging loose. Elias staggered, for he suddenly glimpsed 1,000 shifting versions of himself lurking in the corners. Timid, arrogant, desperate, loyal, cruel. They all stared back, wearing his skin, and from the darkness beyond the walls a faint voice echoed with amusement. Ah, it said softly, disturbingly near. At last you begin to look in the right direction. The stranger's laughter wove into the night, and Elias knew he had not been alone at all. Chapter 9. The Labyrinth of Mirrors. The stranger's laughter, soft and chilling, seemed to cling to the very air Elias breathed. He spun around, cane raised, but the garden was empty. Only the moon, cold and indifferent, watched from above. Yet the feeling of being observed, of being known, was stronger than ever. The distant chanting from the square had grown louder, a low, rhythmic thrum that vibrated through the ground. It was a pulse of collective will, a single monstrous heart beating in the city's core. Elias knew he couldn't hide forever. He had to face the puppeteer, not with steel, but with sight. He followed the sound, the cane guiding him through winding passages and forgotten courtyards. The city felt like a living maze, each turn leading deeper into its masked heart. Finally, he emerged into a vast, circular plaza he hadn't seen before. It was not a square, but a labyrinth of towering, polished mirrors. They stood at odd angles, reflecting the moon, the distant city lights, and countless distorted images of Elias himself. He saw himself tall and menacing, then small and cowering, then laughing, then weeping. Each reflection was a mask, a potential self, a hidden hunger. At the very center of this shimmering maze, the stranger stood. His crimson cloak seemed to absorb the moonlight, and his mask was a perfect, unblemished mirror, reflecting nothing but the world around him. He was a void, a perfect absence of self. "You came," the stranger said, his voice echoing from every mirror surrounding Elias. "I knew you would. The hunger for understanding is a powerful leash, isn't it?" Elias gripped the cane, its carved eyes now glowing with an intense, steady light. "You use people's hungers. You twist their desires." The stranger's mirrored mask tilted. "Twist? Or merely reveal what was always there? I do not create the thirst, wanderer. I merely offer the cup. If they drink, is that my fault or theirs?" He gestured around the labyrinth. "Look, what do you see?" Elias looked into the mirrors. He saw his own face reflected 1,000 times, each one subtly different, each one a potential mask. He saw the fear, the ambition, the longing for recognition he had admitted in the garden. "I see myself," Elias said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. "And I see the masks I wear, even to myself." The stranger chuckled, a sound that bounced off the mirrors like shattered glass. "Good. You have learned to see the clay, but can you mold it? Can you choose which reflection to present, which hunger to feed, which truth to deny?" He stepped closer, his mirrored mask reflecting Elias's own anxious face. "You speak of truth. But what is truth in a city of masks? Is it the face you show the world, or the face you hide? Is it the words you speak, or the echoes beneath them?" Elias felt a dizzying sensation. The mirrors seemed to spin, blurring the line between reality and reflection. The stranger wasn't just asking questions. He was dismantling the very ground Elias stood on. "Truth is what is real," Elias stammered. But the words felt weak, hollow. The stranger laughed again. "And what is real? The love a mother shows her child, or the resentment she hides for her lost youth? The loyalty a soldier pledges, or the fear that drives him to fight? The mask, or the hunger beneath it?" He extended a hand, palm open. "I offer you mastery, wanderer. Not over others, but over yourself. Learn to choose your masks. Learn to play the game. Then, and only then, will you be truly free." Elias stared at the open palm, then at the mirrored mask. He saw his own reflection in it, a face torn between fear and a strange, dark allure. The power the stranger offered was immense, intoxicating. To control his own hungers, to choose his own masks, to navigate the labyrinth of human nature with such effortless grace. The cane in his hand grew hot, its carved eyes burning. It was a warning, a reminder of the broken choir, of the emptiness that came from being used. "No," Elias said, his voice stronger now, cutting through the echoes. "That is not freedom. That is becoming a mask yourself, a perfect, empty reflection." The stranger's mirrored mask seemed to ripple, a flicker of something unreadable passing across its surface. For the first time, Elias felt a shift in the air, a subtle tension. He had touched a nerve. "You cling to illusions," the stranger said, his voice losing its amusement, becoming colder, sharper. "You believe there is a true self waiting to be uncovered. There is only what you choose to be, and what others perceive you to be. The rest is a story you tell yourself." He took another step, and the mirrors around them seemed to lean in, trapping Elias in 1,000 reflections of his own doubt. "You have seen the power. You have felt the pull. Do you truly believe you can resist it, wanderer? Do you truly believe you are immune to the very forces that move all of Ethros?" The chanting from the distant square swelled, a deafening roar that seemed to shake the very mirrors. It was a reminder of the stranger's ultimate power, the collective will he commanded. Elias stood firm, clutching the cane. He looked into the stranger's mirrored mask, not at his own reflection, but at the void behind it. "I will not become a puppet," he said, his voice ringing with a newfound resolve, "and I will not let you make puppets of others." The stranger's mask remained a perfect mirror, but Elias felt a sudden, intense coldness emanating from him. The amusement was gone, replaced by something ancient and dangerous. "Then you will break," the stranger said, his voice no longer echoing but a single sharp whisper that cut through the roar of the crowd. "And when you do, I will be there to pick up the pieces." With a final, unsettling ripple, the stranger's form blurred, dissolving into the reflections of the labyrinth. Elias was left alone, surrounded by 1,000 versions of himself, each one staring back with a mixture of fear and defiance. The chanting from the square reached a fever pitch, a triumphant roar that seemed to mock his solitude. Elias knew the confrontation was far from over. He had refused the stranger's offer, but he had also declared himself an enemy. And in a city of masks, an enemy was a dangerous thing to be. Chapter 10. The library beneath the river. The chanting still shook in Elias's bones as he slipped from the labyrinth of mirrors. Torchlight glowed far off in the city's veins, but here, in the quieter quarter near the river, shadows pressed close. His resolve hardened, but resolve alone would not be enough. The stranger was not bare strength. He was knowledge, honed into mastery. To fight him, Elias needed more than defiance. He needed roots deeper than the stranger's threads. The cane pulsed in his hand, the carved eyes flickering all at once toward the rushing river splitting Ethros in two. The water gleamed black beneath the moon. At the river's edge, hidden beneath stone arches draped in moss, Elias felt an unseen pull. A narrow stairway descended, slick with damp, spiraling downward until the sound of rushing water became a roar above. At its base, in the earth's belly, he found it. A door of bronze. Its surface corroded green, etched with faces not in masks but raw, bare, human, carried with every wrinkle and flaw. Some wept, some sneered, some roared, some trembled. The cane flared and the door groaned open. Beyond lay a vast chamber filled with shelves carved from the stone itself. Scrolls and tomes slept within, their leather cracked, their parchment pale. Dust perfumed the air, but so too did something else, an echo of breath, as though the room itself sighed and waited. Elias stepped forward, lantern light flickering from hooks in the walls. His hand brushed a scroll. Symbols danced at his touch, reshaping into words he could feel rather than read, words that throbbed directly in his chest. They told of countless rulers who had risen and fallen not by sword, but by pulling the strings of human hearts. The oldest truths were not about steel or fire. They were about envy, desire, fear, hope. The same forces Elias had seen whirl through the banquet, the market, the square. The voices in the scrolls seemed to murmur as one. These currents never change. Long before masks, long after cloaks, they are the true river that guides mankind. One tome spoke of mirroring, that to reflect another's hidden hunger was to take hold of it, leading them even while they thought they led themselves. Another spoke of stirring shadows. How to inflame the fears people whisper only in secret is to bind them faster than chains. Another spoke of illumination. To show people what they crave to believe of themselves, and they will walk blindly into the fire. Elias trembled. They were rules, patterns, older than he could fathom, etched into all mankind. The stranger was not inventing tricks, he was wielding truths buried in human flesh. But then his hand brushed another scroll, sealed with wax shaped like an unblinking eye. The wax cracked at his touch, and the script slid like silver water across the parchment. It spoke not of ruling others, but of ruling oneself. Name your envy, and its leash weakens. Name your fear, and its teeth dull. Name your longing, and it can no longer disguise itself as truth. Elias whispered the words aloud, and the cane's eyes glowed, brighter than ever, alive with agreement. Yes, if he could strip his own hungers bare, the stranger's threads would find no purchase. To be unmasked within, to own every shadow aloud, was to cut the strings before they tightened. He sank beside the parchment, repeating the truths. I want belonging. I want honor. I want to be seen. He spat them one by one into the stale air, and with each the weight in his chest loosened. They still existed. They still clawed at him, but no longer did they move unseen. But as his voice echoed, another voice rose behind him, soft as silk woven with steel. Well done, wanderer, the stranger murmured. Elias froze. You find the library, you read the roots, and what do you learn? That I was right all along. These rivers shape every soul. You cannot dam them. Elias turned, yet saw no figure, only shadows thickened at the chamber's edge. You have chosen to resist, the voice continued, echoing across the shelves. But what is resistance if not another hunger? You crave to be different, to rise above, to name yourself hero. That yearning, too, is a leash, and I hold the end of it. The scrolls around Elias trembled, their whispers swelling into a terrifying chorus, some praising the stranger, some pleading for silence. Elias stood firm, the cane blazing in his hand. You may know the rivers, he said, his own voice steadying, but I will become stone in their current. The flow will not master me. For the first time, the stranger's tone faltered. A faint laugh escaped, sharp but thinner than before. Stone cracks, boy, all stone cracks in time. The torches guttered. Darkness swelled. When Elias blinked, the voice was gone, only dust and silence pressing again. Yet the words lingered. Stone cracks. Elias lifted the cane, staring at its burning eyes. Perhaps stone cracked, but stone also endured longer than flesh, longer than masks. Perhaps names spoken aloud could turn rivers aside. And as he ascended the stair toward the moonlit river once more, one question rang louder than the chanting crowd beyond. If the stranger could use the rivers of mankind to bind, could Elias use them instead to free? Chapter 11. The Unseen Strings. When Elias rose from the underground library, the night had thickened over Ethros. The chanting in the square rolled like thunderclouds still gathering strength. Yet in his chest flickered something new. Not just fear, not just defiance, but a sharper flame. Knowledge. The cane with its many eyes glowed faintly, as though pleased. The scrolls still echoed in his head. Name the hunger and leash it. Know the current and redirect it. The stranger had always used people's longings as snares. But what if those same longings could be loosened, unwound, reshaped? Elias's steps carried him to the poorer quarter, where narrow homes leaned crooked, and the air smelled of smoke and stagnant water. Here resentment ran deep. Men and women with masks painted in weary smiles bore the weight of hard labor and hollow coin. Yet beneath their masks, Elias saw more. Envy, yes, but also pride strangled by despair, hope buried under dust. He found a cluster of them around a cracked fountain where water trickled slow and green. They spoke of the stranger's speech, their words thick with awe. He knows our pain, one said. He gives it voice. He promises change, another added, eyes burning. He makes us belong, whispered a third. Elias gripped the cane and felt the pull, the current that drew them, the leash already collared around their throats. He felt temptation to shout, "It's a trap!" But he recalled the scrolls. Resistance with no vision is brittle. To free, one must redirect, not just deny. So Elias stepped closer, voice calm. Yes, he does give you a voice, but tell me, when he speaks of enemies, who does he point to? The group stilled, their gaze sharpened. The nobles, the rulers, they said cautiously. Elias nodded. And when he speaks of triumph, what role does he give you? Do you build? Do you create? Or do you only destroy? The air thickened. Beneath their masks, Elias saw flickers of shame, confusion, unease. Their hunger for belonging was strong, but so too was their hunger for dignity, for the sense that their lives were more than weapons wielded in someone else's hand. You already carry strength, Elias pressed, his voice lower. Not just to tear down, but to rise by your own craft, your own hands. Why should he be the one to decide your worth? Why should you be puppets dancing to his drum, instead of builders shaping your own stone? The masks quivered. The pull of the stranger's chant still echoed in them, but Elias felt a subtle loosening. They were not free. Not yet. But the leash had slackened. Their hunger, once hooked by promises of rage and revenge, now bent toward self-respect, toward the dignity of belonging without destruction. A spark. Perhaps only a small one, but sparks could spread. As Elias left the fountain, confidence mingled with fear. The stranger was right. No one escaped hunger. But perhaps one could name it, shape it, even use it to unbind instead of enslave. Yet the darker truth pressed against him. If he could do it, then he was walking the same road as the stranger. Each word, each glance, each redirection. Was it liberation or manipulation painted in softer colors? He had no time for answer. For as he turned a corner, he froze. In the alley before him loomed dozens of masks, faces of the stranger's closest followers, their painted visages twisted into fiery devotion. They stirred like a tide, encircling him, their eyes wild with the stranger's flame. At their center, the crimson cloak. The stranger stepped forward, mask shifting into a grin of triumph. You think you can pull strings, wanderer? You think you can turn my chorus against me? The crowd stamped their feet, the chant swelling. Elias's throat tightened. He had nudged a few out of the weave, but here was the full tide, bound as one body. The stranger leaned close, voice cutting through the chant like steel slicing silk. Then show me, Elias. Show me if you can unmake what I have created. The torches hissed. The alley thundered with voices. And Elias, cane raised, felt the city waiting to see if he could wield the unseen strings without binding himself. Chapter 12. The Final Unmasking. The alley shook with the roar of the crowd, their masks glowing in torchlight like a bestiary of false faces. Smiling, wailing, snarling, radiant. Every voice proclaimed devotion, stamping feet in rhythm, the chant swelling until it seemed the very stones beneath Elias's boots would crack. The stranger stood in their midst, crimson cloak alive with flickers of fire, his mask shifting faster than Elias had ever seen, joy to sorrow, love to fury, reverence to scorn. The shifting faces blurred together until it became unbearable to look at him, as though 1,000 souls warred inside a single man. You cannot win, the stranger called, his words carried on the gale of chanting. Because even as you resist me, you feed me. Your defiance is a mask, your hatred is a leash, and I hold them all. The chant crescendoed, a wall of sound. Elias raised the cane, its carved eyes blazing like suns. The world sharpened. He no longer saw the painted masks. They peeled away before him like ash and flame. Behind them, the raw faces of the crowd glared, twisted not in devotion but in something deeper. Each one carried a leash made of hunger. Some craved belonging, others craved vengeance, power, recognition. All were bound because none had named their own yearning. They had surrendered it to the puppeteer. The scroll's lesson thundered within him. Name it, and it weakens. Deny it, and it swallows you. Elias drew a breath so full it bruised his chest. Then he shouted, his voice somehow rising above thousands, Do you even know what binds you? The chant faltered. The stranger's mirrored mask flashed toward him. You want vengeance, Elias roared, pointing at one man whose fists clenched. You want to burn your fear away by setting fire to others' lives. The man staggered, his mask slipping, his face paling. Elias turned, voice breaking with ferocity. You want to be seen as great because you fear how small you feel inside. A woman clutched her chest, her mask trembling. Gasps rippled through those nearest. Elias swung the cane, its burning eyes glaring into the throng. Each of you hides behind his mask because you fear naming your own hunger, but hear me now. Whatever you crave, it is yours already. Yours, not his to chain. Name it aloud and you cut his strings. Silence struck the edges of the chant. Some voices cracked into cries. Masks slipped. A man fell to his knees, sobbing. Yes, I am afraid. I only followed because I was afraid. Another spat. I envied them. Their gold, their power, I envied, and he fed it to me. The web began to unravel, threads loosening under the weight of confession. The stranger's cloak flared. His voice thundered, panicked now, a lash. Fools! Every word you speak binds you tighter. You belong to me! But Elias saw it, the panic. For confession untied what silence bound. The more they named their hungers, the weaker his hold became. You see? Elias shouted, voice hoarse but burning. He only rules over what you refuse to face. Speak it and you are his no more. One by one, voices broke loose from the chant, not in harmony but in raw confessions, shattered fragments of truth, fear, envy, desire, longing. Each word stripped away a leash, turning the crowd from a single roaring beast into scattered souls, exposed but free. The stranger's mask flickered wildly, struggling to hold form. Rage twisted into pleading, command into terror. Cracks appeared across the mirrored surface. No, he bellowed. Without masks you are nothing. Without me you are chaos. Elias lifted the cane high. Its eyes flared blinding gold, reflecting every broken mask, every confessed hunger, every scrap of humanity suddenly bared raw in the torchlight. You are not chaos, Elias declared. You are mortal, flawed, hungering. And in that, there is more truth than all his shifting masks together. The stranger screamed as his mask split down the center with a sound like shattering glass. Beneath it was no face at all, only emptiness, a void made of all the leashes he had pulled, now cut loose. His crimson cloak collapsed into itself, scattering like smoke whipped apart by wind. The alley fell still. Torches guttered. The roar had ended. The crowd stood blinking, dazed, their faces bare. Some wept, some laughed nervously. Some simply stared at their own trembling hands, as if seeing them for the first time. Elias sank against the wall, exhausted, the cane heavy as stone. The eyes along its shaft glimmered not in warning now, but in quiet acknowledgement. He had not erased hunger. He had not given them peace, but he had broken the leash by forcing them to see, to name, to own what they hid. Above the rooftops, dawn cracked the horizon, spilling light across Ethros, and as the first rays revealed the city's countless faces, Elias knew the stranger was not gone forever. There would always be others who wore masks woven of hunger and lies, but he also knew this. So long as people could name what lived in their shadows, they need never dance to another's tune again. The chanting was gone. Only silence remained. But it was a silence not of defeat. It was the dangerous silence of people discovering their own voices. Thank you for listening to this story here on Momentum Mind. Now I want to hear from you. What book or story of growth should we explore next? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this journey inspired you, remember to like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next story. Your momentum begins right here.